Welcome back to another thrilling installment of Free Read Fridays. I'm your intrepid narrator slash host, Fragath, and today we'll be reading more of The Ascension Factor by Bill Ransom and Frank Herbert. Pictured here, I think the Russian cover, given it's in Cyrillic. I don't know what it is with Russian sci-fi and having some of the most awesome covers ever. But it's true that they do. They get some pretty great covers. So last time, not a whole hell of a lot happened. The biggest thing that occurred is that Ben Ozette and Crista Galli are well and truly off and running. They have made it to the sea. They are trying to travel as surreptitiously and incognito as possible. So they are traveling underwater, and there is a stand of kelp that has grown smart enough to know that you don't let yourself get noticed, or humanity raises you to the ground, or the seabed. But it knows Crista Galli is there, and it is subtly moving currents to direct it somewhere. We don't know where yet. Let's see. Beatriz Tatoosh showed a bit of defiance to the Raja Flattery regime by asking questions on air about where is Ben Ozette? People like him. Why are we not asking about that? And she does this as a bunch of Flattery's personal security force are basically they bust into the room and are kind of intermingled. Basically a giant threat, just standing around there. We'll see where that leads, if anywhere. And I think that's it. I mean, Raja Lawn Flattery. Oh yeah, Raj Flattery has a underground subterranean garden with, I believe, it's implied to be a bunch of like terrestrial flora, as well as some altered hooded dashers that have been interbred with big cat DNA. So that's special. Other than that, I think that was about it. Those were the major things. Nothing else in terms of major plot developments. It's been kind of slow and steady, but it takes off soon. Soon it takes off, I promise. Where are we? Yes, we will mark that page if I can find where I put my bookmark. There it is. I have oh so very many bookmarks. Unfortunately, I have so many that they blend into the background. Alright, that should be fine. Let me see how long that next chapter is. Alright. We shall see. Oh, hey. Pierre Teilhard Desjardins. Nice! That's a familiar name. Anyway, let's get rocking and a-rolling and enjoy, hopefully.
You have been educated in judgment, which is the essence of worship. Judgment always occurs in the past. It is past thinking. Will, free or otherwise, is concerned with the future. Thinking is the performance of the moment, out of which you use your judgment to modulate your will. You are a convection centre through which past prepares future. Dwarf Macintosh, Kelp Master, from Conversations with the Avata. Course change. Elvira's voice was as emotionless as rock, but Rico detected the slightest edge of worry in the flurry of her fingers across her command console. She never piloted the foil in its voice mode because she preferred to speak as seldom as possible. That Elvira had spoken at all worried him. That, and the increasing shimmy that had begun a few minutes back. Why? When working with Elvira, Rico picked up her habit of non-speech. She seemed to like that. Channel change, she said, nodding toward her screen. We're being steered off course. Steered? He muttered, and checked his own instruments. They maintained their position in the Kelpway, but their compass said the huge undersea corridor was running in the wrong direction. Who's doing the steering? Elvira shrugged, still busy with her keyboard. She had taken them deep into sub-train traffic to minimize tracking, and they ran without the help of sensors that would light their progress through the Kelpways. We're out of the wild kelp sector outside Flattery's launch site, he said. That's where the weirdness usually happens. One half of his screen displayed the navigation grid projected by current control from its command center aboard the orbiter. The other half of the screen tracked their actual course through the grid, which now appeared to be bent. Bending, he corrected himself. It looks like our whole end of the screen is pouring down a drain. Anything on the navcom? He asked. Sometimes current control changed grids through the kelp to accommodate weather conditions further up channel, or the recent stumping of a stand of rogue kelp. Negative, she said. All clear. The ride began to get bumpy, and Rico cinched himself tighter to his couch. He keyed the intercom and said, Rough water, everybody cinch up. Ben, you better come up here. Below them, Rico could see another cargo train careening dangerously close to the kelp, attempting to recover from the sudden change. Their dive lights showed him that the kelp seemed to be in a struggle with itself, fluttering the channel as if pressing against a great force. Ben used the hand grips along the bulkhead to work his way to the console. Can we get current control? Ben asked. He dropped into his couch and cinched up. Not without giving up our position. We got out too easy, Ben said. They've got a bug on this thing anyway. Had, Rico said, smiling. I did an E-sweep when we left the harbor, thinking the same thing. Found it. Elvira here jettisoned the little devil into a net full of krill that we passed about a dozen grids back. Good work, both of you, Ben said. All right, let's try that cargo train below. The flying fish was buffeted again by something like a huge fist. Elvira wrestled with the controls to keep them out of the kelp. Rico knew, as they all knew, that any damage to the kelp could be construed as an attack. A lot of kelp lights were active in this sector. Besides the red and blue telltales of a waking stand, this kelp flashed its cold navigation light at random and occasionally flooded them with the brighter fiber-optic sunlight that it transported from the surface. If the stand was one that had awakened, any mistake could get the foil and themselves torn apart at the seams. Didn't Flattery just go on the air to tell us how safe he'd made the kelpways? Just goes to show, Rico said. You can't believe that bastard for a goddamn blink. The cargo train, passing in the opposite direction beneath them, was having even more trouble than they were. A relatively tiny foil could stop in mid-channel and hover if necessary, but the cargo train needed to maintain a constant speed for maneuverability. The grid system was set up so that the trains, Pandora's lifeline, could travel the kelpways swiftly and undisturbed with minimal course changes. From what Rico could see of the bucking cargo, the crew below at both ends of the train had their hands full. "It's bending," Rico said, watching the Navcom monitor that marked out their grid system. "The whole grid's bending." "We'd better surface," Ben said. "Prepare for—" "Negative," Elvira said. "If this is a surface disturbance, things will be worse up there. We need information." Ben grunted acknowledgement. "Cargo train identity signal is registered to the Simplicity Maru," Elvira reported, fighting the controls to maintain hover and an equidistance between the walls of the kilometer-wide channel. This ordinarily simple maneuver was made nearly impossible by the ever-changing walls of their kelpway. Rico noticed a sweat beading on Elvira's brow and upper lip. Ben keyed for a low-frequency broadcast. He hoped he didn't have to explain the absence of their identity signal. "Simplicity Maru, this is Quicksilver," he lied. "Do you have reports on current disruption?" Yes, it is the current as opposed to the disruption of the... Although it is kind of a multi-layered pun or play on words. "Do you have reports on current disruption?" Static hissed back at them, then a microphone clicked on. The message came in, badly broken. Undersea communication, especially around active kelp, was always difficult. "Maru, negative into kelp." There was the sound of shrieking metal in the background. "King up! We are preparing ballast! Repeat, prepare... Elvira threw the throttles forward, and in spite of a violent buffeting, the foil leaped at her touch. Her lips were pressed into a tight line, and her knuckles shone white on the controls. "Wait, we can't," Ben said, his body pressed further into his couch. "We can't go into deep kelp." "They're blowing ballast," Elvira growled. "That whole cargo train's going to pop into us like a cork." Rico felt every fixture aboard rattle like his teeth. "Ben, is the girl secure?" "She's strapped in," Ben said. Just then they cleared the rear cabin of the train. It blew past them toward the surface, containers and cabins tumbling like toys. A few of the containers snagged in the walls of the kelpway, walls that still vibrated with light and that same strange force. "This is too weird," Ben said. "Let's surface and take our chances with the director's air cover. This ride's getting much too ugly." Elvira nodded curtly, and the foil started its ascent. As though alerted by their control panel, the kelp fronds began closing above the flying fish. First they formed a canopy, then a tight and impenetrable mesh. A sudden change of current lurched them to starboard and sent the foil tumbling end over end. Elvira righted them manually, her face very pale. "Shit!" Ben fisted the arm of his couch. "Somehow Flattery must have got to current control." He snicked his harness release over Rico's protests. "I'm checking on Crista," Ben said. He had to use the handholds to make his way aft on the rolling deck. At the galley's hatch he turned, suddenly a bit pale himself, and Rico knew what thought had just struck Ben. Rico smiled. "Rico," Ben said, What if the kelp knows she's here?" "Yeah," Ben said. "What if the kelp knows she's here?" We'd better hope she likes us." "She probably doesn't have any say in this," Ben said, and undogged the hatch. Rico didn't care for the snap in his voice. "Somebody has a say in this," Rico muttered. The hatch slammed, dogged itself. That was when Rico remembered when the kelp could have had a whiff of Crista Galli. It was the only time that hull integrity had been breached. "That bug," he thought. "That goddamn little mercuroid chip of Flattery's." "We ejected that transmitter, Elvira, and we ejected it in cabin air." He thought he detected an infinitesimal stiffening of her posture. "If that kelp can sniff, and I hear it can, then it knows there's more in this can than worms."
Mercenary captains either are or are not skillful soldiers. If they are, you cannot trust them, for they will always seek to gain power for themselves either by oppressing you, the master, or by oppressing others against your wishes.
Machiavelli, the Prince.
The young security captain, Yuri Brood, was rumored by his men to be the unacknowledged son of the director, product of an early tryst with a merman woman from the domes. The men based this notion on the strong physical resemblance between Brood and the director, and on Brood's quick rise to an advisorship that went beyond the formalities of his rank. The two men shared a ruthlessness that did not go unnoticed outside the confines of the squad. Captain Brood and his squad had been reared in a merman compound near this Kalaloch district. Brood himself had been schooled privately in the mathematics of logic and strategy. That was standard operating procedure for anyone anticipating an executive position with Merman Mercantile. Brood himself preferred the more direct solutions of physical pressure to the subtleties of politics. His superiors shrugged it off as a phase, agreeing that Brood got results where others failed. The old families, Islander and Merman alike, retained a strong sense of loyalty to their community that made the kind of enforcement that Flattery demanded impossible from within. Security Command removed Captain Brood's team to Mesa for their training and formation of their combat bond, then deployed them to Kalaloch and its shuttle launch site for, police work. They were one another's only family, an island adrift in a sea of enemy. Everyone was kept 3 villages away from home. Survive your tour, advance your rank, retire to an office at the preserve. This was the universal goal. The young captain was afraid, and he wasn't afraid often. When he was afraid, heads rolled. He and his team were short-timers at 1 month remaining, just starting their countdown to home. The captain had something to return home to, and he intended to rotate on schedule. He intended that his men rotate back home with him, alive. For a year, his district had been Kalaloch and the SLS. His squad's actions had drawn more citations than a dress suit could hold. During that year, either the site or his men had been under fire daily. Today, the captain faced Beatriz Tatoosh from the back of the studio, and he thought what a pity it would be to have to kill her. Beatriz did not know what the captain thought, but fear dried out her mouth when she saw his squad enter behind the lights and fan out along the bulkhead backing the studio. The captain pointed out each of the live cameras to 3 of his men. They pulled away from their squad, drew laser guns, and without a word each took careful aim at a cameraman. Beatriz heard gasps, curses, the arming of weapons. It was difficult to see what was happening because of the glare in her eyes. The large monitor at the back of the studio cleared, then displayed a tape of the last launch, a tape cut by Beatriz and her present team. "We're not going out live," she thought. "Dak," she alerted her floorman, "check the monitor." When her gaze left the monitor, it caught the young captain watching her. She remembered seeing him before, his dark eyes flashing her a smile as he led his squad through the labyrinth of the launch site. He half smiled now, and nodded at her, and with that nod his 3 men executed her 3 cameramen. At the first shot she was stunned at the suddenness of it all, the audacity as much as the horror. At the second shot it was the smell of death itself that stunned her. At the third shot she faced the immediacy of her own death. She also faced the captain, who was no longer smiling. She remembered thinking how hard everyone was breathing just then, how the second guard stood over the dead cameraman and said to the first, "Shit, man, that was no signal." "Shut up, man," the third one said. "It's done. Just shut up. It don't change nothing here at all."
"All right."
The captain fanned his fingers out from his left palm, and the rest of the squad sealed off the studio area. She started to tremble, then concentrated on controlling it so that the captain wouldn't see. "Ben was right," replayed through her mind. "And who will know?" Beatriz watched the replay of herself on the monitor, interviewing the director during one of his ritual visits to the launch site. The expression on her face on screen, one of admiration and deference, now made her sick to her stomach. Even so, her eyes stayed on the screen, rather than face the unbelievable reality unreeling in her studio. Through the shock and the trembling, she heard Harlan's voice from the back of the studio, speeding through a Zavatan chant for the dead. She remembered that the skinny cameraman with the fan-like ears on number 3 was Harlan's cousin. The security who had shot him was now dragging him by the feet to the wall. The cameraman's head bumped over the sprawl of cables across the deck. The hole in his chest burned so clean it barely bled. The 3 assassins took wider positions in the room. 15 people were being held by 9 guards in a very small studio with some very hot lights. The captain scanned the studio once, then turned to Beatriz. He indicated the red lights on the triangulators.
"The red light means the camera is on, correct? It is still recording?"
She did not answer. She felt it was important that he didn't hear her voice quaver. She could not take her eyes from his eyes. He did not smile this time, nor did he nod.
"Finish them," he said.
Then he nodded at Beatriz.
"Except for her."
The screams, the pleading, the curses with Flattery's name on them silenced in the few moments it took the captain to walk her to the hatchway. It seemed that she walked forever, because there were the bodies of her crew to step over, and her legs were so uncharacteristically unsteady.
"Now see what you have done,"
Brood said to her. He squeezed her upper arm and shook her.
"See what a mess your broadcast has made."
She couldn't speak or she would cry, and she didn't want to cry for him. She slapped away his touch when he took her arm to steady her. The last body she had to step over to reach the hatchway was the makeup girl's.
What was her name?
Beatriz felt a new panic rise.
I can't blank out her name.
It was Nefertiti. Yes, Nefertiti. Someone pretty and dark-skinned like herself with wide eyes. She told herself to remember this, to remember it, and to see that somehow, sometime, the world would know.
"You're a cool one," the captain told her. "You probably saw worse than this at Mesa 2 years back."
She stopped in the hatchway and turned, still not speaking.
"I saw you there, too," he said. "I saw both you and your boyfriend bounced ass over tea kettle when that mine blew up your rig. Thought you both bought it."
She nodded, started to say, "So did we," but nothing came out of her throat but a croak. For the first time, she noticed his name, stitched above the Vachon security insignia at his left breast. Brood. Her only wish right now was that she would live long enough to see Captain Brood die. He turned back to the studio and its 17 dead, warm bodies. Beatriz looked once again at herself on the monitor. The tape replayed an interview with Dwarf McIntosh, kelp master of current control. He was one of the few humans, other than Flattery, to survive the opening of the Hybe tanks 25 years ago. He was so tall she'd had to stand on a box to do the interview. She had met him on her first flight to the new orbital complex, the day after her last night with Ben. Within a month, she was sure that she was in love.
"Bag 'em up," the captain told his men. "Squeegee this place down, seal it off, and then get all their production shit aboard."
He bowed to her then, opened the hatch for her, and said,
"We're expecting the replacements for your crew any minute. They are my men, and will do as they're told. My squad and I will travel along to see that you do too."
"Oh, hello, Urilino. Thanks for tuning in." "The mind that is a dead mind." Dwarf McIntosh, kelp master, current control. Dwarf McIntosh floated in the turret-like chamber of current control and surveyed the planet below for the birth of a certain squall at sea. It happened at about this time every day that a swirl of clouds materialized over Pandora's largest wild kelp bed. It was some comfort now to see this squall forming. It told him that something was normal today, even though the behavior of the kelp was completely loco. Today, humans didn't make much sense to him either. The turret, as he called it, was a plasma glass extravagance of materials and workmanship that McIntosh had fabricated for himself before installing current control in the orbital station. "I'd have taken the job anyway," Mac admitted, but only to himself. Kelp Master wasn't so much a job to him as it was a privilege. He couldn't have allowed any of Flattery's goons such an easy throttle hold on the kelp. Besides, he felt much more comfortable in orbit than he did on Pandora's surface. Like Flattery, Mac had been cloned, raised, and trained in the sterility of Moonbase, in the hyper-regimentation and clonophobia of Moonbase. His whole life, until hibernation, had been spent orbiting an Earth that, for him and for all the clones, never existed. In those days, Flattery had openly pined for a life Earthside, but even then, Dwarf McIntosh looked outward, past Earth's measly system to the possibilities beyond. From his turret, there is no N, I don't know why my mouth inserted one, from his turret, Mac observed and charted many of these possibilities. He named them, but not the few special names he saved for his unborn children. He had spent the past 2 years above Pandora, refusing the usual R&R rotations groundside. In that time, McIntosh had not recognized a single star that would lead them earthward. He liked it that way. Dwarf McIntosh awoke from hibernation on Pandora one day. That's why. Dwarf McIntosh awoke from hibernation on Pandora one day in indescribable, unpronounceable, more like it. Dwarf McIntosh awoke from hibernation on Pandora one day in indescribable pain and found himself in the middle of nowhere, galactically speaking. In spite of the planet's horrors, he was in his own heaven among a trillion brand-new stars. The other survivors clung to that little wretch of a planet, and most of them died there. Alyssa Marsh, well, she died too. She died the day Moonbase started imprinting her for backup OMC. Mac and Flattery shared a dream of driving further into the void. Mac felt it a pity, in a way, since he had never liked Flattery, even during training with him back at Moonbase. Their differences had come out lately over management of the kelp. "If Flattery had any idea of what we've done, of what the kelp is..." "Dr. McIntosh, shuttle's set for launch." Mac handed himself out of the turret, and with one foot thrust sailed across the huge control room to his personal console. Spud Soleus, his first assistant, and person with best name ever. Spud Soleus. What a great name. I mean, Dwarf McIntosh is, or McIntosh, is also great, but Spud Soleus? Soleus. Spud Soleus, his first assistant, busied himself at the primary terminal. A glance at the number 6 display told Mac that the kelp in the SLS sector was performing as directed. The number 8 display was a different story, however. The great kelp bed down coast of Victoria was still a writhing tangle. No telling how many freighters were lost in there. He punched up another batch of coffee. "What's the delay?" Spud shrugged his skinny shoulders, keeping to his console.
They said something about replacements for the news crew. You know Flattery can't do anything without crowing to the press.
"Who's been replaced?" he asked. He felt his heart jump a bit. He'd been hoping, no, planning, to see Beatriz Tatoosh again. He'd thought about Beatriz Tatoosh daily from the moment her shuttle left nearly 2 months ago. His dreams took up where his thoughts left off, and he had dreamed up the hope that she could make permanent base aboard the orbiter.
Don't know, Spud said. Don't know why either. Everything was cool just a while ago for Newsbreak. Did you see it?
McIntosh shook his head.
Yeah, you were in your turret. The Tatoosh woman did the show, said something about Ben Ozette missing. That must throw their staffing off or something.
Yeah, Mac said. He's a little goody-goody for me, but he means well. He's sure been on the director's tail lately. Dwarf could see Spud's frown reflected in one of the dead screens.
It's not a good idea to get on the director's tail, Spud said. Not good at all. If you didn't see the news break, then you didn't see yourself either.
Me? What?
That show they did when you first installed this station, Spud said. They reran it. Your hair wasn't as gray 2 years ago. I wish that Beatriz Tatoosh would look at me the way she looked at you.
Stow it, McIntosh said. Soleus's shoulders sagged slightly, but he kept at his keyboard in silence. Sorry, McIntosh said.
Inappropriate, Spud replied.
Want me to take it now?
I wish somebody would. What the hell's happening to our kelp?
It's not our kelp, McIntosh reminded him.
The kelp is its own self.
We're keeping it in chains. It's doing what any enslaved being with dignity does. It's fighting the chains.
But Flattery's men will just prune it back, or worse yet, they'll stump the whole stand.
Not forever. There's a basic problem with slavery. The master is enslaved by the slaves.
Come on, Dr. Mac.
McIntosh laughed. It's true, he said. Look at history, that's easy enough. And Flattery, of all people, should know better. We clones were the slaves of our age. First-generation clones had it real tough. They were grown as organ farms for their donors. They needed us, but they needed us to do what we were told. Now, he's enslaved the kelp, stunted its reason, because he needs it to do what it's told. He can't keep cutting it back, because he cannot afford the regrowth time.
So what'll happen?
A showdown, McIntosh said. And if Flattery's still groundside when it comes, he'd better hope that the kelp needs him for something, or I wouldn't give you 2 bits for his chances.
2 bits of what?
McIntosh laughed again, a big bark of a laugh to match his size. "Ha! I wouldn't want to guess how old that expression is," he said. "When I was at Moonbase, 2 bits was a quarter, which was a quarter of a dollar, which was a currency that we used. But it started way before that."
We'd say I wouldn't give a dasher turd for his chances.
That's probably a better assessment. McIntosh pointed at the 6 red lights blinking on their messenger console.
Whose calls are we not taking?
Whose calls are we not taking?
The director, Spud said, and swiveled his chair from the console board. He wants us to try to do something about the kelp in Sector 8, as though we weren't trying. Do something? Ha! If we push any harder, we'll fry our board and that kelp and anybody inside it. I wonder what it is that the kelp wants. What if we gave it its head? McIntosh mused. That would be one way to find out. What could it do that it hasn't already done? Spud shrugged and said, You've got my vote. How are you going to convince the director?
A glance at the display showed the entire stand of kelp to be twisting itself into a vortex, like the whirlpool in a drain. As near as McIntosh could tell, current control was at its maximum limit of restraint. Spud pointed at the display.
There's a focus of electrical override here. Whatever's bugging the kelp is right there. Electrical or mechanical? Could be either, or both. It's a heavy traffic area, Spud said. Something down there is definitely irritating the kelp.
Yes, McIntosh agreed. That's my thought. The electrical override is coming from the kelp itself. It must be responding to something. That stand's not mature enough to think for itself. Or, at least, it shouldn't be.
Doc?
Yeah? McIntosh watched the console review the kelp's configuration changes over the past half hour. Something nagged at him, something that would explain the kelp's sudden behavior.
I've extrapolated the path of the override.
McIntosh looked at Spud, who was busy at his own console, and saw a very thin, very pale assistant. Spud's pointing finger trembled with excitement.
What is it? It's a spiral headed into the middle of Sector 8.
That means the one kelp bed is delivering something to its neighbor. Isn't that what it looks like to you?
Or the neighbor is snatching it away.
Spud, I'll bet you're right. McIntosh stepped up to the console and tapped out a sequence with his two huge index fingers. The red lights on the messenger panel went black. We just had the relay malfunction, McIntosh said, and winked at Spud. Next time Flattery calls, tell him it was a hardwire failure and you worked it out personally. Maybe you'll get a promotion. If I've guessed wrong, my job will be up for grabs. Now, we might as well let go of the range on this kelp and see where the hell it runs. McIntosh heard Spud swallow behind him, and he smiled. What's the big deal, Spud? It's a plant. It's not going anywhere.
Well, it's just that Flattery doesn't trust anybody. It'd be like him to have some kind of booby trap.
He did, McIntosh said, and this stand got himself blown apart a few years back. But he hasn't reset charges here yet. He hasn't reset charges here yet. The kelp's not supposed to get this frisky this soon. He waited for the burst line to charge. There, he said, and pressed the send signal. Now let's sit back and see what cooks. Something bizarre is inside there, and I'd like to be the first to know what it is. If we can't do anything with this stand, maybe we can at least learn from it. Besides, he winked again, Flattery's down there, we're not. A beeping signal from his console interrupted him. He opened the intercom to launch command.
We sling our bird your way in 5 minutes, the voice said. Any contraindications?
Negative, McIntosh replied.
Currents on your site are stable. Weather will arrive at your location in approximately 1 hour.
Roger that, current control. Launch is a go for 4 minutes.
Cannon in D. Pachelbel. The immensity recoiled with a snap from the shock of freedom, then let its tendrils and fronds drift in their tingling bliss. It had been a long time since this union of stands had felt good, and never had it felt this good. The submarine trains foundering among its vines were inconsequential now. A pulse went out among the fronds, a ripple throughout the immensity from the tiny foil adrift at its outer reaches. A mass of tentacles cradled the foil and delighted in the scent of. Yeah, okay. A mass of tentacles cradled the foil and delighted in the scent of self that it gave from its brittle skin. The little craft was slippery, and the immensity knew it to be extremely fragile, so it was gently tumbled frond to frond inward. Other scents mingled with that of the One. One of these scents was familiar, provocative, kelp-like. The Hollow Master, Rico Lapouche, was in the company of someone that the kelp had encountered before... Well, no matter. It would find out soon enough. The immensity had learned to sniff out the holo language of humans from their spectrum of odd scents. It decided, early upon awakening this time, that it would have to speak with humans to live. It also concluded that it would have to speak the holo language if it wanted to speak with humans. The foil tried to wriggle out of the kelp's net. There was much pain now through the vines, where all of the trains trapped in Sector 8 were trying to burn, cut, and slash their way toward their precious atmosphere topside. Some of these the kelp crushed reflexively, but when the death scents of the crews mingled with the sea, it forced itself to calm and to reason. Death, it reminded itself, is not the answer to life. The immensity managed to open several kelpways and marveled at the easy ballet of subs heading topside. Only the bright white holovision foil suffered the grip of the immensity. It strained its engines trying to flee, but never lashed out at its tormentor. This the immensity would expect of the one who was civilized in the arms of kelp, and of the honorable associates of Holomaster Rico Lapouche. In conscience you find the structure, the form of consciousness, the beauty. Kero Peniel, translations from the Avata, the histories. Beatriz listened to the launch crew director count down the final minute over the speaker. Her shaky fingers chattered the metal clips as she snugged up her harness. She tried to think of the straps around her as Mac's arms, and she tried to imagine that they held her as Ben's did the night they drove old Vashon down. It didn't work. Nothing could erase the sight of her crew, slaughtered like Sebet in a pen. For a mistake, she thought. They all died because that bastard made a mistake. She knew that the captain was afraid. She could smell it on him before he gave the final order at the studio. He obviously didn't know whether Flattery would promote him or execute him for his decision. Beatriz knew that her life, perhaps many other lives, teetered in this balance. 10 seconds to launch. She inhaled a long, slow breath through her mouth and let it sigh out her nostrils. This was a relaxation technique that Rico had taught her when they all nearly drowned 5 years ago. 5, 4, she took a little breath. 1. The compressed air boot punched them up the launch tube, and a pair of Atkinson rams slung them toward orbit. This was the part of the ride she hated. It reminded her of the time the fat girl sat on her chest when she was just starting school, and she didn't like the feel of her face flattening out against the strain. On this launch, however, she wasn't worried about wrinkles, engine failure, being trapped in orbit. She was worried about the captain and how she could help convince him of the necessity of keeping her alive. No one in the shuttle cabin looked familiar. Most of them had changed out of their fatigues and into civilian clothes. They were quiet. Beatriz thought that they must be weighing the consequences of the shootings. She didn't see the man who started it. That was the man she feared even more than the captain. Ben had always said that the jumpy ones get you killed. How could he be so rad and be so far away from me? She rubbed her tired face and patted her cheeks to keep hysteria at bay. She needed information, and a lot of it. Mac, she thought, he'll help me, I'm sure. For an instant, her fear included him. After all, he was an original crew member like Flattery. They had worked together long before waking from hibernation on Pandora. What if... She shook off her fears. If her imagination had to run away with her, she preferred that it ally her with Mac instead of against him. Mac was not at all like Flattery, this she knew. Even Mac had cringed at the news when Flattery converted Alyssa Marsh to an organic mental core. I never believed we needed such a thing, he'd told her privately. Now, with the kelp research, I'm even more convinced that OMCs were just another built-in frustration, a goad to push us even further from humanity. According to reports, Flattery's reports, Marsh had been found in extremis after an accident in the kelp. He explained to her how clones were property, often merely living stores for spare parts, and how Alyssa Marsh had been prepared for this moment from her girlhood. Now, Beatriz realized how fortuitous the timing had been for Flattery, how unfortunate for Marsh and her kelp studies with Dwarf Macintosh. What will Mac do? He would need information, too. Like, how many in this squad? What kinds of weapons? Do they have a plan, or is this just reaction to the killing's ground side? She couldn't remember how many people worked the orbiter station. 2,000? 3? And how much security did they have aloft? Not much, she remembered. Just a handful to handle fights and petty theft among the workers. She'd counted 32 in the captain's squad as they boarded the shuttle, and each was heavily armed. 8 of them were assigned to fill out her crew, and they grumbled under the double load. This bunch carried a lot of the old, disfiguring mutations. The gear they'd loaded aboard was mostly weapons, but a few of them knew enough about holo broadcast to bring the bare bones of what they'd need to get newsbreak on the air. A couple of techs were assigned to oversee the OMC. Beatriz had kept the worst of the sheiks at bay, and now, strapped firmly into her couch, she nearly let herself go. No, she warned herself. Hold tight. I can't help anyone dead. I am the only witness against them. She hoped that the console tape survived back there and that someone sympathetic would find it. Who would they show it to that could do anything? She wondered. Flattery? Beatriz grunted a laugh at herself, then felt the captain's grip on her shoulder. It was firm, not painful. It was not gentle. It reminded her of her father's grip the night he died, and it lightened the same when their engines shut down. This man was the same age as her youngest brother, but there was infinity in his dark eyes. She didn't see much wisdom. I know what you're thinking, he said. I have taken hundreds of prisoners. I have been a prisoner. Believe me, I know what you're thinking. He gestured the guard beside her away, and, surprisingly clumsy in 0G, moved up to join her. His voice sounded gravelly, strained, as though it had been screaming. He continued speaking, while his men drifted out of earshot, their glances furtive and their conversations spare. We are both in a bad spot, you and I. We both need out of it. She had to agree. Up here it will be all or nothing. We are trapped. There is no escape for either one of us that doesn't require both of us. This, too, she had to agree. But only for the moment, she assured herself. Only until I find Mac. Beatriz realized that, much as it disgusted her, her life depended on communicating with this man. You are a military man, an officer. How is it that you walk yourself out the plank like this? You wouldn't have done it on reflex. This is a plan, and I simply fall into it. My God, you're perceptive. The words came in a rush, the captain's eyes a-glitter. We can only win. Flattery is finished. We have the void ship and orbiter, enough food stores for years. We control their currents and weather. We have Flattery's precious organic mental core. Shit, we can hook it up to the ship ourselves and fly out of here. She didn't hear the rest. Her mind focused on what he'd said at the beginning. Enough food stores for years. If he kills everyone aboard the orbiter, he'll have to throw it in, the captain was saying. The rebel will have at him down there, and he doesn't dare destroy everything that he's worked up for. And he doesn't dare destroy everything that he's worked for up here. Whoever beats him on the ground can deal with me. He's really going to do this, she thought. He's going to kill everyone aboard. He took her hand, and she snapped it back with a revulsion that she couldn't hide. Us, he said. I meant they can deal with us. You and me. They'll believe whatever you tell them, at least for a while. He leaned closer, whispered, You don't want to make another mistake. Get more people killed. She propelled herself out of her couch, not caring where the thrust might throw her in the gravity-free cabin. No one pursued her. The first handhold she grabbed stopped her beside a pair of security, younger than the young captain, who were reviewing the basics of holo-camera triangulation. They really intend to go on the air, she thought. She looked back at the captain. He had his back to her, briefing several men. The tone of his voice, briskness of his gestures told her that he meant business. It was true. He could do it without her. It was true that by helping him she might save others. She could not bring herself to speak with him, to go to him in any way. She sighed and interrupted her two new cameramen. No, she said. With that setup, the Alpha set only gets 15 degrees of pan. Okay, if you're covering a launch, but we'll be inside in a small space. As she instructed the two young amateurs, she saw Brood watching her. He winked at her once, and she successfully suppressed the shudder that tempted her spine. They'll want to see this organic mental core in transport, and they'll want to know something about her background. Let's start by getting some of that in the can. She passed the 2-hour flight instructing her camera operators, 2 men and a woman, none of whom she recognized from the massacre at the SLS studio. Beatriz preferred their company, even if they did answer to the captain. Whether by accident or design, she did not encounter any of that squad during their flight. The organic mental core was a living brain, enclosed in an intricate plasma glass container that made allowances for the hookups to come. A complex plug would connect the brain with the control system aboard the void ship. What she didn't expect horrified her the most. They're supported by bodies. She had done a report on such a thing several years ago. Scientists had connected a brain from a crushed body to a healthy body that had suffered a massive head injury. Each kept the other alive, though there had been no way to communicate with the healthy brain. At that time, it was simply trapped in there, cut off from all sensation, alive and dreaming. She took a deep breath and let the reporter in her take over. The medtech in charge had a number of active facial tics, and each of her questions seemed to accelerate them. She learned nothing about the principle that she hadn't already learned through research or through Dwarf Macintosh.
As you well know, it was because of a failure in the OMCs that we wound up on Pandora.
I understand that the OMCs were traditionally taken from infants with fatal birth defects. This OMC is from an adult human. How will the performance differ?
Twofold. the tech replied. First, this person was dying at the time of conversion, therefore she, should be thankful for an extension of her life in a useful, indeed noble role. Second, this person survived the longest hibernation known to humankind and woke to life on Pandora. She knows that if humans are to survive, it must be elsewhere. She can take comfort in being the instrument of that survival.
Does she know any of this? The tech looked perplexed.
Much of this was included in her early training. The rest we extrapolate from the evidence.
What was she like as a person?
What do you mean?
The tech's ticks accelerated rapidly to a very distracting crescendo. You're saying, essentially, that she will accept this duty because of love for humanity. Did she have love in her life? A man? Children? Her camera crew was warming to the task. They had not brought a monitor into the tiny space, and now she wished they had. It might be an okay piece, after all. While staring at this brain behind glass, Beatriz knew that it was alive, a person. She also realized that the tech was surrounded by the squad that had murdered her crew, and he probably hadn't the slightest inkling of what had happened. No one will know if I don't tell them, Beatriz thought. I'm like this brain, cut off but alive inside. I wonder what she dreams.
I know very little about the person, he said. It's in the record. I do know that she had a child that was given up for adoption so that she could continue her studies in the kelp outposts.
Dr. McIntosh stated 2 years ago that organic mental cores were crude, cruel, inefficient, and unnecessary, she said. Do you have a comment on that? The tech cleared his throat.
I respect Dr. McIntosh. He, along with the director and this OMC, is one of the last survivors of the original flight of the old Earthling. Ship, if you prefer. Yes, it's true that there were failures, and this required some compensation, but those bugs have been worked out.
For some of our viewers, your term compensation might seem a little cold. The compensation you refer to was the first known creation of an artificial intelligence, one that turned out to be smarter than its creators, one that many believe is the personality Ship, one that most Pandorans still revere as a god. Why did your department pursue the failed course of OMC's, severed living brains, rather than pick up on the artificial intelligence?
We were instructed to take this course.
You were ordered to take this course, she corrected. Why? Why is the director more comfortable with failure than with the success that saved his life? And hers? Beatriz pointed to the OMC, wired into her box, deaf, blind, and dumb, beside her warm, dead host.
That's enough!
The captain's voice behind her froze her spine and started her hands trembling. She was stunned silent again while the tech and her crew inspected the deck and their shoes.
I'll speak with you in the cabin.
She followed him out of the shuttle's storage lockers and into the dimly lit passenger cabin.
I had to stop you, he said. It is expected of me, no matter what my opinion. Soon there will be no need for deception. Prepare for docking. There will be briefing materials for the next news break when we get aboard.
3 Orbiter security lounged at the docking bay as the hatch opened from the shuttle. They were ready for the press, for the holovision cameras, but they weren't ready for Captain Brood. The captain remained inside the hatchway, with Beatriz beside him.
3 men out there, he said to her in a gentle voice.
His eyes held her with that same wild glitter. She tried not to look at his face.
Choose one for yourself. One to entertain yourself.
She was stunned at the question and his calm, disarming manner. She felt a something rise at the back of her neck, something that she'd felt tingling there before the killing started groundside.
You want none of them, he answered for her. How fickle.
He pulled her aside and signaled the men behind them to fire. In seconds, nearly a quarter of the orbiter's token security force lay dead on the deck.
Dispose of them through the shuttle airlock, he told his men. If you kill one in a room, kill all in a room. I don't want to see any bodies. Beatriz will announce that there is a revolt in progress aboard the orbiter and the void ship. We've been sent to stop it.
Why do you do this to me? Beatriz hissed. Why do you tell me I have a choice when I don't? You are going to kill them anyway, but you have to include me.
He waved his hand, a dismissal gesture that she'd long associated with Flattery.
A diversion, he said. Part of a game. But see, you are stronger for it already. It amuses me, and it strengthens you.
It's torture to me, she said. I don't want to get stronger. I don't want people to die.
Everybody dies, he said, motioning his men aboard. What a waste when they don't die for someone's convenience.
Oh, I love a good, unrepentant villain. Yuri Brood is, pretty... He's a character, all right. Oh, one sec here. Yet more Autobot spam from Twitch. Of course there bloody is. I don't know how many of those I've added to the bloody block list already. It's too many. Too many, I say.
Anyone who becomes a master of a city accustomed to freedom and does not destroy it may expect to be destroyed by it.
Machiavelli, the Prince. Spider Nevi's favorite color was green. He found it peaceful. He jockeyed Flattery's private foil across the green-tinged seas and allowed the plush command couch to soothe the tension out of his back and shoulders. Green was the color of new-growth kelp, and tens of thousands of square kilometers of it stretched out around them as far as the eye could see. Some sunny days, Nevi spun a foil out of moorage just to drift a kelp bed, enjoying the smell of salt water and iodine, the calm of all that green. He didn't like red. It reminded him of work, and it always seemed so angry. The interior of Flattery's foil was finished in red, upholstered in red. The coffee cup that Zentz handed him was also red.
"What's so special about this Tatoosh woman?"
Zentz gurgled.
The director got the hots for her?
Nevi ignored the question, partly because he wasn't listening, partly because he didn't care. He was about to have his first sip of coffee for the day when the Navcom warning light flicked on. He almost didn't notice it because the light, like everything else, was red. An abrasive warning tone blatted from the console, and he started, spilling hot coffee into the lap of his jumpsuit. He doubted that he would have missed that tone if he were comatose. Their foil slowed automatically with the warning.
Go ahead, he told Zentz. Let's hear it.
Zentz turned up the volume on the Navcom system. Nevi couldn't stand the radio chatter while he was trying to relax, so he'd had Zentz shut it down when they hit open water.
You are approaching a no-entry area. Sector 8 is disrupted. Kelpways not secure. Code your destination and alternate routes will appear on your screen. Be prepared to take on survivors. Repeat. Warning. Code red. You are...
Nevi took the foil down off its step and kept the engines idling.
Fools, Nevi muttered. They were warned to keep her away from the kelp.
You think they're in there? Maybe they made it through before.
Zentz cut himself off when he saw the anger in Nevi's eyes.
Get a display up, Nevi ordered. I want to get a look at this disruption.
He coded in the private carrier code for Flattery's quarters. The waters around the foil had already gone from choppy to rough, and in the offshore distance Nevi could make out portions of a large sub-train bobbing the surface.
Yes.
It was a female voice, curt.
Nevi here, get me the director.
The display that Zentz had been working on spread across their screen. It reminded Nevi of a weather picture of a hurricane, everything on the outside swirling toward the center. But this was kelp, not clouds, and it was happening undersea, almost within sight of their point. He was not happy with the delay from Flattery's office. The woman's voice came back as curt as the first time.
The director is busy, Mr. Nevi. We are in full alert here. Someone blew up one of the outer offices. A security detachment has attacked the catalogued power plant, and there is some problem with the kelp in Sector 8. I'm in Sector 8 right now, he said, his voice as even as he could make it. If he can't talk, get me a direct line to current control. Current control has been incommunicado for nearly an hour, she said. We are attempting to find out the meaning of... I'll keep this frequency open, Nevi snapped. Get him on the air now.
Her only response was to close the circuit. Nevi pinched the bridge of his nose for a moment, staving off one of his headaches.
You should have kept her on,
Zentz said.
What did she mean? A security detachment has attacked the catalogued power plant. We defend the catalogued power plant.
We need to figure out where the Galli woman is, and we need to get our hands on her fast.
Nevi interrupted.
She's our bargaining chip no matter what's going on.
He tapped their navcom screen with a well-manicured finger and traced the spiral pathway that wound from edge to center.
I'm guessing she's in there somewhere, he mused, and anything in there is headed for the center. There isn't time to bring in any hardware. We'll have to chase them down or intercept.
You mean follow them in there?
Zentz asked.
What about the attack on the power plant? Something's coming down the ranks and my men...
Your men seem to be undecided about their loyalties, Nevi said. They can work that out among themselves, but I'll put you out here and radio for a pickup if you'd prefer.
Zentz's massive face paled, then flushed.
I'm no coward,
he said, puffing himself up.
There's just something going on at the preserve where I...
Flattery's carrier frequency sounded its tone, and his voice crackled in their speakers.
Mr. Nevi, we're having some urgent problems here that need our full attention. What do you want?
I want a direct line to current control. The kelp out here is going berserk, and if you want the Galli woman, we need to straighten it out or knock it down.
I'm monitoring their actions, Flattery said. They've applied full power to that sector, and the subs have all surfaced. Things here are getting sticky. A bomb went off in my outer quarters about half an hour ago. Killed my staff girl, Rachel, and that guard, Ellison. Looks like he brought the damned thing inside. Mop up out there as soon as you can and get back here. We may go code Brutus on this one. Our chief of security has some answering to do.
The connection was broken at Flattery's end.
Code Brutus, Nevi thought. So it's starting already. At least out here, right now, we don't have to choose sides.
He had no doubt which side Zentz would ally with. For Zentz, a return to Flattery meant sure execution. Too many errors, too little strategy.
Maybe he's already in on it, he thought.
Zentz was on the radio to his command center at the preserve, chewing out some major. If this was a coup from the security side, he didn't believe Zentz was in on it. Nevi kept his attention on the screen. I had just lost my space. Nevi kept his attention on the screen, where the kelp configuration didn't seem to change.
Would it be worth it, going in after them?
He thought it probably would. The different factions of Pandora only needed a symbol to bring them together, and Nevi knew Crista Galli was ready-made for the job. Better his hands on her than Shadowbox. Besides, he'd maneuvered around troublesome kelp in the past and never had problems that he couldn't handle. And if a coup did come down, Nevi could be seen as rescuing Crista Galli, along with the very popular Ozette. That would get the media on his side.
Either way, that Lapouche has to go, he thought. That one's been too much trouble for too damned long.
Nevi didn't want to be the one to rule Pandora, if that was what all of this came to. He was happy being the shadow, being the arranger of possibilities. His distaste for Flattery and his style grew more unbearable by the year, but he had no desire for the hot seat himself.
Code Brutus, he thought. A coup attempt from within.
Nevi didn't think that Zentz was capable of carrying off a coup, though he had to admit that he was in the middle of the perfect alibi, at sea with the director's highest-ranking assistant, a known and effective assassin. Zentz was finished chewing out the major in charge of the power plant, and the configuration of the kelp on the monitor hadn't changed a bit. Nevi checked his fuel reserves, all 4 tanks full. He pressurized the fuel, retracted the hydrofoils, and extended the airfoil.
We're going back?
Zentz asked. His voice sounded eager, but not greedy.
No, Nevi said, and smiled. We are going to pinpoint them from the air, then go in. We have enough fuel for almost an hour.
After an hour, they'd be forced to set down on the water to extract more hydrogen, but Nevi planned to have everything that he needed aboard by then. The highest function of love is that it makes the loved one a unique and irreplaceable thing. The highest function of love is that it makes the loved one a unique and irreplaceable being. T. Robbins, from a literary encyclopedia of the atomic age. Beatriz was hustled through the passageways and locked inside the orbiter's makeshift holovision studio with 3 techs from Brood's crew. None of the 3 had been at the launch site killings, but none of them had much to say to her either. A large portable screen behind her hid the wet lights and mirrors that cluttered all 6 studio bulkheads. The same holovision logo she wore at the left breast of her jacket emblazoned the screen. It was an eye, bi-dimensional, but the pupil was a holostage. Beatriz loved weather and had never liked the claustrophobic world inside the studios. That was why she and Ben had worked so well together and, in spite of offers, spent so many years in the field. Her recent promotion carried a lot of studio work, and her contract guaranteed a room with a view, on paper. She missed the sense of drifting she'd had, growing up an islander. Aboard the orbiter, she was assigned a cubby rimside, more than a kilometer from the studio near the axis. From her cubby, she watched Pandora wake and sleep above her bed. Her father, a fisherman, would be taking his mid-afternoon break right now. Inside the studio, there was no time of day, no night. Her instructions from Brood were simple and cold.
Relax. We'll do the work. You just read what's in front of you when the red light goes on.
A small security camera mounted high on the bulkhead kept track of her every move. It was a toy, a trinket compared to the personalized cameras and triangulators that her team used at the launch site. Holovision's equipment got worse every year. She missed her own gear. They were the best, she thought, and maybe that last tape is still inside. She wondered whether Brood's men had picked them up. Rico made those sets, she thought, and those triangulators, too. Nobody who knew cameras could pass those up. She felt her first rush of real hope. The cameras weren't down at the launch site at all. They're here, she thought, or at least they're in orbit with us. She didn't want to think about the tapes. For now, she wanted only to focus on the cameras. She couldn't help wondering what they'd do with the tapes. Keep them as backup. Record over them when their other tapes are full. She doubted that whatever this team planned would involve a whole lot of tape. But Tex had brought them along. Her logic assured her of that. They might still be on the shuttle. She didn't want to go back down to that hatchway, where Brood's men had shot those guards down. Beatriz glanced up at the surveillance camera. Is it a person behind that thing? She wondered. Or tape? She didn't think they'd waste the tape. The techs ignored her altogether. They worked quickly at several editing and sound stations, coordinating something among themselves. She suspected it had something to do with her. Maybe there's no one behind it. The 3-hour light flashed. 3 o'clock in the afternoon marked the start of the assembly of the 6 o'clock news. Getting the tapes was only one problem. Inserting them into a holovision nightly news broadcast with Brood's men Inserting them into a holovision nightly news broadcast with Brood's men watching posed another problem. She knew who could help her with the second problem, and it was the person she most wanted to see. Mac could get a message groundside, coded to the right frequency and digitally encoded. She knew because he'd done it once for her at Ben's request. He was teaching me, she realized. Ben must have thought something like this might happen. Most Pandorans were too hungry to fight, she knew that. Thousands already slept in holes dug in the talus, under torn plastic vulnerable to demons and the weather. From her family she learned that fighting was only one way. She remembered something her grandfather had told her, something she'd told Dwarf McIntosh last time. Educate, agitate, organize. Flattery had organized the world. Now Beatriz wanted to use that organization against him. Communication would do it. People had their bodies. Coordination of all those bodies would be the key to their freedom. How to get away with it? Maybe she couldn't get away with it. What kind of message would she deliver them? It might save Ben and Rico, too, she thought, though in a part of her somewhere they were already beginning to disappear. She tried to make her shocked and exhausted mind think through all that had happened in the past 24 hours, all that there was to go. I've got to get to Mac, she thought. That is, if Brood hasn't... She wouldn't allow herself to complete the thought. She concentrated on what she had to work with. This small studio aboard the orbiter had been her project all along, her excuse to stay close to the stars. It was a little larger than the one at launch site. Flattery had had it installed to be sure that the Void Ship project received the best documentation, the best publicity, the world's complete attention. She knew now what its primary purpose had been all along. Diversion, something to keep people looking up, while Flattery stole their boots. The studio was divided into 6 engineering units and 1 live set, where Beatriz worked. Quarters were very cramped. 6 editing screens and a couple of very large clocks kept them in touch with the world. A constant barrage of images rolled across the 6 screens as the editorial team groundside reviewed the day's film from the field and made their selections. There was a small... Page did not want to turn. There was a small holo stage in the center of the room for final mock-up and a large view screen behind it. Both the clocks and the growl in her belly told her things she didn't want to know. 3 hours to airtime, she said. Her console indicated she was speaking into a dead microphone. She raised her voice. We're 5 hours behind schedule. No answer. The techs worked as though she were a piece of furniture. They relayed tapes of their own groundside They relayed tapes of their own, groundside, for editing and placement. Beatriz rolled her tape of the organic mental core up one of the screens, and suppressed a shudder. This was a person, a living, thinking brain, kept alive by attachment to a comatose host. She wondered what it was that caused the coma. She was certain that she knew who. "I need to talk with Dr. McIntosh," she said. This was not the first time she'd said it, and the response was always the same. Silence. She'd received the silent treatment from the techs since docking aboard the orbiter. From the occasional glances in her direction, she surmised this to be orders from Brood rather than choice. Unlike counterparts of old, this OMC would be able to talk, using neuroelectrical pickups. When the time came, it could communicate with the neuromusculature of the ship, feel everything that transpired aboard. This, Flattery reasoned, would keep the OMC sane where the original OMCs had failed. It was clear to Beatriz that Flattery didn't want to face the kind of artificial consciousness that had brought humankind to Pandora. There were those who believed that ships still existed, and would return. The hive tanks that had brought Flattery, Mac, and Alyssa Marsh were evidence to Beatriz that ship could be very much alive, God or not. "If I can get one of these techs to start talking, that would be a wedge against Brood," she thought, "and it might be a way to Mac." Current Control and McIntosh were only a few meters down the passageway. Beatriz could practically feel the vibrations from his throaty speech, his huge body bashing about his offices. Current Control and the Holovision remote studio shared a few kilometers of cable between them, but no hatchway. Both areas were soundproofed. Beatriz tried to remember what Mac had taught her about their hookups. He'd spent a lot of time orienting her during her trips aloft. What came to her were his philosophies and musings, the relaxing tone of his deep voice. He remembered nothing of the link-up between the two rooms. She had already tried a few electronic tricks of her own to contact him, but with no luck. "He knows I'm due," she thought. "Maybe he'll come looking for me." She hoped that it wouldn't mean walking into his own execution.
Manipulating the kelp electronically is like making a marionette out of a quadriplegic. The trick becomes keeping it a quadriplegic.
Raja Flattery from Current Control from the Skies, Holovision feature. Crista felt a pressure on her whole being. It was not like the pressurized cabin, like air pressure. It was some indescribable containment of herself inside some huge envelope, like the pressure she imagined the positive pole of a magnet might feel when in the company of another positive pole. "You don't have to be afraid of the kelp pulling this thing apart," she said. "Flattery's lab reports say it kept me alive underwater for 20 years. It can keep us alive." "Can" is the operative word here, Ben said. He didn't look her in the eye, but hung his head over her restraints as if staring at them would right the foil and set them on their way. "If what you say is true, it wants you alive. The rest of us are compost."
"The kelp's not like that," she said. "You've been listening to Rico. I knew it before Flattery's people cut it back, remember? It kept me alive. For all we know, it kept others alive the same way."
"Lots of people spend lots of time down under," he muttered. "Nobody's seen anything like what happened to you."
"Why just me?"
When Ben's gaze did meet Krista's, goosebumps clustered her forearms. Everything that she knew about his kindness, his sacrifices for others, froze inside her with the chill of that look. "I've wondered that," he said. Others have wondered too.
That's why Flattery never let me get to the sea, she said. He said it was to protect me, but I think he was just suspicious that I'm some kind of a Vatan spy, a trigger of some sort. Maybe I was raised by a plant, but I can read people fairly well. Let me touch the kelp. It will calm down then. I know it will.
Not a chance. If Flattery's right, if Operations is right, your chemistry is different now. It could kill you. I don't want anything to kill you.
I don't want anything to kill anybody, she said. But the kelp is confused. It's just lashing out. Nobody tells it anything.
With that, the foil pitched upside down. Ben hung on tight to a handhold, his face pressed into the plasteel bulkhead. Crista tried to speak, upside down and against the pressure of her restraints.
Avata needs our help, she said, and we need Avata. You have to help me do this, Ben.
There was that strange, stunning snap in the air, the same snap that had stilled a mob for moments at the pier. It was like the discharge of some great capacitor. Crista felt their foil slowly roll, pull her tighter into her restraints, then right itself. She watched Ben drop his hands from his ears and sit up on the deck, shaking his head. The damaged foil moaned and chattered about them like mechanical teeth, but the fist of the kelp was gone. Crista saw the flicker of the intercom charging, then heard Rico's tight voice.
Ben, look at the kelp.
Only one of the starboard lights still probed the dark, so the view that Crista and Ben had from the galley's plaz was gray and black, dreamlike, cold. They hadn't dared activate the kelp's luciferase. It would make tracking too easy. A fine seawater spray wetted them both as they watched the easy dance of deep-water kelp. This was the same kelp that, moments ago, quivered with a tension so strong she thought it might uproot itself. Crista, herself, felt a relief that was more than just calm after the storm. It was a release, like the elation she had felt at the start of their journey when she slipped skyward, hitching her consciousness to the highlighter.
Can't really see very well, Ben said. Look at the size of those vines. Some of them are 6 meters across, and we can't even see bottom yet.
That should tell you something, she said. It should give you an idea of what the kelp's really like.
What do you mean?
You said it yourself. Some of those stalks are nearly as thick as this foil is wide. For the kelp, it must have been something like handling a squawk egg with pliers to keep from crushing us.
Maybe so, Ben muttered. We're headed topside, and the kelp's apparently floating free. We'd better see what kind of damage we took before it changes its mind.
Lights dimmed in the galley, brightened and dimmed again.
Elvira can't get the engines to fire, Ben said. That's going to make a lot of things tough, including our oxygen production.
The gray hulks of kelp floated dreamlike outside their hull, while the chunks of torn fronds and sediment, ripped up by its struggles, settled around them.
See, she said, the kelp means us no harm. If you would let me—
We're all staying put, Ben said. The kelp simply stopped. Maybe it got whatever it wanted. Maybe that wasn't us. No point in looking for more trouble.
He nodded toward the spray that had already soaked both of them and started pooling water across the galley deck.
We've got a few details to clean up. Let's get at it.
Crista tugged at her harness.
I can't do much until you get me out of this.
Any damage back there?
Rico asked over the intercom.
I think we popped a cooling pipe, Ben said. It's not much of a leak now that we're surfacing. What do you have? We're not terminal, but we're hurt. Elvira says topside, so topside we go. You two okay? We got a little wet, stamping his feet in the gathering pool.
At that, they both laughed. Something she did not do often, something she'd discovered with him before. Something she'd discovered with him before. He opened a panel in the bulkhead beside her and reached inside. Water plastered his hair to his head. Crista's felt just as flat, but when she saw herself reflected back in the plaz, a laugh still teasing her face, she liked what she saw. Her crop of wet white hair framed the green flash of her eyes. She saw that she had twisted in her harness, which explained why, now that things had quieted down, her right breast stung so badly. She wriggled herself free and tugged her clothes straight.
There's a shut-off in here somewhere,
Ben muttered. He poked his head inside and bumped it. Whatever he said was unintelligible. Crista's gaze fell on the hollow strips of the nightly news field crew, strips that covered the whole interior bulkhead of the galley. Shots of Beatriz, Rico, Ben, and a half-dozen bearded strangers were interspersed with location stills of Ben and Rico, Ben and Beatriz. Several of Ben and Beatriz. Crista didn't see Elvira up there.
"Beatriz is beautiful," she said, raising her voice so he could hear.
"Very."
"You look happy together," she said.
"Yes,"
he answered, also raising his voice so she could hear. Then she heard a curse and a thump, and the water stopped spraying. Ben came out of the access cabinet and wiped his face with the least damp spot on his shirt. His green eyes looked right into her own.
"When we were together, we were happy,"
he said. He did not turn to look at the pictures. "More often than not, we were on opposite sides of the world. Lately, she's been up there." His thumb indicated the general direction of the orbiter overhead.
"Do you wish otherwise?"
"No," he sighed.
"It's as it should be. I have things to do here."
Things to do,
Crista thought. What she wanted him to say was,
"It's as it should be. Now I've met you."
But he didn't say that. An odd feeling came over her, a dizziness and a weakness in the knees, a tingling in her temples, like it had been with the highlighter, like her dreams. A year ago, Crista had begun dreaming dreams that came true. At first, they came only in the night. She knew they weren't dreams, but she despaired of calling them visions. Lately, they came all the time, and inside the last one she forgot to breathe. Crista was sure they came from the kelp, and they were getting more intense. She had feelings that she'd always explained as dreaming somebody else's dreams. It was something she now knew came from the kelp. Today, now, she saw two things. She saw Rico in a green single suit, and that suit was the fruit on a vine, and that suit was the fruit on a great vine of kelp. In the distance beyond him, she saw a stand of kelp with a human growing from each great vine, looking like a seascape of bowsprits with interesting carvings, or like bait. The kelp grew a membrane, clear and goggle-like, about their eyes. It seemed a part of them, like fingernails, but never needed trimming. Their lungs would never want for air, and their skimpy bones would soon forget land. The second vision pulled away from the first and showed her the kelp from a tremendous height. One kelp vine snaked skyward, and a cold light, like luciferase, touched its tip. The vine, the kelp bed, the planet itself began to glow. In the light below, she watched the kelp writhe for a blink, then convolute itself into what appeared to be an immense, glowing brain. She felt a sense of easy grace that only came to her now in dreams. Just as suddenly, the visions vanished. Crista was a dreamer, but these were not dreams. She was sure the kelp had a message for her. "I've got to get out there." She stared into the picture of Ben and Beatriz, stared into Ben's eyes, and concentrated on slowing her heart rate, slowing her breathing. I'm glad you're here, Ben, she said. I'm glad it's as it should be with Beatriz. If all is well among us, we can bring Flattery down. The kelp knows this. Maybe Flattery knows it too. Inside the kelp, I can find out what all this is. The kelp is vulnerable now, as we are vulnerable. It is stunned, not dead. Help me out there. I can make the difference.
No, he said. You're not going out there. We'll all stay aboard the foil. Once we're ashore, we can get to an oracle or the beach.
We don't have that much time, she said. I don't know how I know it, but right now I could become Avata, be the consciousness, the command center, the conscience of the kelp. Show me the way out.
You don't know that, he said. Your chemistry is different. You told me so yourself. Maybe it would just keep you alive out there. Maybe it would keep you dead. Just wait a few.
We can't wait, she pleaded.
She sighed, rubbed her eyes, and went on.
I think he's been using the kelp to gather data. I was blown up while they were doing it. Now he's found out what he wanted to know, and he's heading off planet at breakneck speed.
When she looked up, she could see that he wanted to believe her. It had been the same way last night when she saw that he wanted to kiss her. She just knew. As she knew, there was something catastrophic imminent, and Flattery knew what it was, and Flattery was fleeing as fast as he could with as much as he could. Stay put. Stay put, Ben said. His voice was softer, as softened as everything was now that the beating had stopped. He tousled her wet hair. Flattery isn't getting away today, so let's get out of this fix first. Give Rico and Elvira a chance to work their magic on the foil. She could tell that he was convincing himself. He was afraid. She knew a little something about fear. The day she had been blown free of the kelp had been a day much like this. This time she was headed in the right direction. It was a quarter tide in the afternoon, and they were fewer than a dozen meters from daylight.
Short-term experience always fail in the long term.
Dwarf McIntosh. Beatriz had taped here for the first time during the ceremonies that had welcomed Current Control's move aboard the orbiter 2 years ago. She had received a tour on the arm of the mysterious Dr. McIntosh, a dizzying tour that changed her life, and included her first attempt to navigate in near-zero gravity. Now, a few of the captain's men held her incommunicado, while the rest did what soldiers throughout history had done to secure a garrison among an unarmed and isolated populace. None of them moved comfortably in low gravity. Since her only contacts were with Brood's men, smuggling messages to Max seemed out of the question. What if they kill him, too? She wondered. Oh, thank you, Uralino / Thank you for telling me. I will keep an eye on that. It didn't appear... I'll have to check analytics afterwards. It could be a broader systemic issue. It could be on my end. What if they kill him too? She wondered. Mac was a very compassionate man, but one who immersed himself in his work and didn't often pay attention to the ways of the world more than 150 kilometers below them. It struck her, too, that that had been her own problem. Ben had seen it and tried to help. I know Ben's alive, she thought. I feel it. She hoped that Mac was alive, too. Partly because he was someone she genuinely liked. Partly because she was sure that all of their fates depended on him. Brood needs him too, she thought. He'll use me as his bargaining chip. The hatch slammed open, and Yuri Brood sailed through. He rebounded into a safety webwork that was set up to catch rookies and keep damages minimal. Brood pointed to the bank of editing screens as he settled into the seat beside her.
You think that because my men are warriors, they can't do your show, he said. He was out of breath, but seemed in good humor. Well, we greenhorns have something to show you. The director had us shoot this just before we left for the launch site. Leon turned in the rough copy on his way to the shuttle. She tried not to watch the screens, which displayed clips that Brood's 3 techs had shot of the damage at Kalaloch. As each rolled up on a screen, a text of tentative script flashed across the console in front of her. There was no fighting apparent in any of the tapes. It only took her a glance to tell what he was up to. "You're trying to make this look like a highlighter disaster," she said. "You can't get away with it. Somebody else from Holovision must have been on the scene. Word of mouth alone." She stopped when she saw his sneer. It was an expression that reminded her immediately of Flattery. The person, not the sense. Not the concept. Brood had the same narrow nose, dark, upraked brows, the same manner of tilting his head back to look down his nose at everyone. Though he had been flushed and slightly out of breath when he came in, Brood seemed in no hurry now. He watched her eyes constantly, and this made her very nervous. "You might have noticed how many new faces there are among the field crews these days," he said. "Quite a few new faces around the studios, too." He smiled, and the smile chilled her. "Are you saying that all of the crews have been replaced?" "Lots of people looking for work these days," he said. "People willing to do the necessary thing to get the job done." "Our job is reporting the news, telling the truth." His laugh cut her off. "Your job was reporting the news, telling the truth," he said. "Our job is keeping order, and if distorting the truth a little helps keep order, then that's what I'll do. People are happier this way. People are dead this way, and you will have to keep killing them." "Watch this section," he ordered, and snapped his fingers at Leon. "They're sure to use it tonight. Isn't it a lot better view of the world than what you think you saw?" Her console read, "Lead. Kalaloch residents flee their homes in the aftermath of a highlighter explosion that split the settlement in two." Scene, Screen 1. Rescue of elderly woman from smoldering rubble of a habitat. A housing project. "Okay, darling, you hold on now, okay?" Voiceover. "Today, Vashon security forces rescued this elderly woman from the char that was smoldering around her cubby. Death toll has exceeded 1,000. Authorities are now estimating more than 15,000 people to be homeless tonight, many of them seriously injured." Scene, Screen 2. Rescue crew in security uniforms alongside residents, rebuilding wall at the preserve. Animals rounded up in background. Voiceover. "Meanwhile, thousands of animals are milling between the preserve, where the explosion freed them, and the firestorm that laid waste to the edge of the village. Authorities here are anticipating return of most, if not all, of the preserve's prize livestock, which includes the only breeding pair of llamas in existence." Scene, Screen 3. Heart of all the tenements, the habitats that are still burning. Voiceover. "In parts of Kalaloch, the fires still burn, as they have for more than 5 hours. Much of the public market is destroyed. More than 100 looters were reported shot in the first hours after the blast. A warehouse containing 70% of the sector's rice and dry beans will burn for days, according to fire officials. Most of this year's storage has been destroyed by flames, smoke, or water. Disastrous food shortages are expected." But that's not even close to true," Beatriz hissed. Her outrage broke the fear barrier. "Flattery has all that stuff buried in storage bins all over the preserve." "Shh," Brood said, still smiling. He placed a finger to his lips and nodded toward the screens.
Beatriz hated that smile, and she vowed to find a way to erase it. Leon, the only journeyman tech of the three, frowned and cleared his throat. Even with Brood there, he wouldn't talk to her. He simply pointed at Screen 4. Scene, Screen 4. The harbor, boats on fire at moorage and in the bay. Ferry terminal littered with bodies, most in bags, which the camera panned quickly from a height. Voiceover. Authorities estimate that as many as 500 commuters perished from the concussion as they changed shifts on the docks today. No ferries suffered any permanent damage and are operating on schedule from the repair docks. Scene, Screen 5. 2 crying women with commuter tags, holding their ears and comforting one another. Smoke and masts in the background. Text. Something hit our ears, and there was that blast from those things. I don't know what happened to us. They're all dead. Voiceover. Mrs. Gratzer and her neighbors claimed that at least 2 Class 4 highlighters, attracted by fires in nearby refugee camps, exploded and destroyed several square miles of eastern Kalaloch. Dick Leach has lost 3 ice houses full of seafood. Text. All of our income for this year has been taken away from us, and all the bills that it took to produce that crop are still here. Voiceover. They will be eligible for low-interest Merman mercantile loans. Text. If it comes to a loan, we're going to have to probably pull out. We need a grant. Scene. Screen 6. Pull away from the body bags laid out on Kalaloch Pier. Voiceover. The ordeal seems to be over for these commuters, but the hardship's just beginning for tens of thousands of hungry, homeless families in the Kalaloch district. All screens cut to black. Then her console read, "Accepted for final edit. Elapsed time to follow." So, Brood was right all along, she thought. They're going to run it. Beatriz didn't feel particularly afraid anymore, just tired and incredibly sad. "I need to see Dr. McIntosh," she said. "I was assigned a story on the OMC and the installation of the Bangassa drive, and I intend to do it." "Dr. McIntosh has his hands full right now," Brood said. "There's a crisis in current control, a priority crisis. He knows you're here." "Then let me go to current control." "No," he laughed. "No, I don't think so. He will come here when the time is right." "What about the rest of them, the people here?" "So far, they suspect nothing. We have been very quiet, very selective. When shifts change, rations are left uneaten, then there will be talk. That will be hours from now, and we will be finished here." "Then what?" he answered with a smile and a half-salute. "I will check back to see how you're doing. Go ahead with your piece on the OMC. Leon, good job. You know what to do." Then he was gone as quickly as he came. "What is it you're supposed to do, Leon?" she asked. He didn't answer, and he didn't smile. He was lean and dark, like Brood, and she thought he might even be a relative. Leon handed himself to one of the editing consoles and sat with his back to her. He was still for a moment. Then he said, "We're putting a story together on Crista Galli and one on Ben Ozette." Beatriz felt herself go cold. "And what's the lead?" Her voice stuck in her throat, barely a whisper.
Crista Galli safely in the hands of Vashon Security Force.
"And Ben? What about him?" Leon was silent for a few more blinks. He typed something into his console, and it came up on her own. Holovision reporter killed in highlighter blast. She tried to still the trembling in her hands and her lips. "It's a lie," she said. "Like the rest, it's a lie. Isn't it? Isn't it?" Without turning, without apparently moving a muscle, Leon spoke so quietly she barely heard. "I don't know." The gods do not limit men. Men limit men. T. Robbins, A Literary Encyclopedia of the Atomic Age.
Dr. Dwarf, Spud called from behind the Gridmaster. You were right. There's another kelp frequency inside that sector. Look here.
Dwarf McIntosh glanced up from underneath one of the consoles that fed the Gridmaster. The Gridmaster. The Gridmaster. Though a big man, McIntosh had always been adept at getting at problems in small places. In fact, he preferred crawling through the tunnels of cables and switches to attending any of the so-called recreational events aboard the orbiter. He backed his way out of the shielding ducts and towered over Spud's shoulder to see what he had found.
This signal came through when we released the kelp in Sector 8, he said. It's taken me a while to fix and amplify. I see the rest of the kelp is doing well, McIntosh said.
He reviewed the readouts flanking the kelp display.
It released at least 20 captured cargo trains, if our data here are correct.
Spud nodded.
They are. The kelp's just floating free. Most of the vessels are on the surface, though, and the afternoon squall in that area is due right about now. There are no kelpways, no way of guiding them through. Unless we get a grid in there pretty soon, they'll just get fouled in all that slop. This is a very small focus, McIntosh murmured.
He's got a deep voice. Why am I making it? Whatever. His stare at the screen seemed intense enough to propel him right into the middle of the kelp itself. He pulled himself up to height and tapped a thin lip with his forefinger.
Without tapping into that other signal, we won't be able to enforce a grid. I'm sure of it. What's the history?
Spud spun the graphic yarn on Mac's screen.
It moves, Spud said. Yeah,
McIntosh nodded.
Runs the kelpways like a pro, and it's something the kelp would gnaw a limb off for, don't forget that. So what do you think? Merman transplants being routed? Signal's too strong, McIntosh said. A stand doesn't register with us unless it's achieved some kind of integrity, whether Flattery cuts it back or not. This is like having a whole stand of kelp in a spot no bigger than you or I. And it can move. And it can move.
Mac stroked his chin in thought.
It can persuade the kelp to resist our strongest signals, even with a threat of being pruned back to stumps. The data flow tells us that the signal's been getting stronger by the hour. Flattery's been frantic about this in spite of riots at his hatchway. What does all this tell us?
Spud frowned at the screen in imitation of Mac and tried stroking his chin, too, for answers.
There's somebody running the kelpways, acting like a stand of kelp?
McIntosh whooped, grabbed Spud by the shoulders, and gave him a shake. They both spun high against the upper bulkhead. The startled assistant's eyes opened nearly as wide as his mouth.
That's it! McIntosh laughed. What we've got disrupting the grid in Sector 8 is a person pretending to be a stand of kelp.
He dropped his grip on Spud and stuck his head back into the electronic and neuroelectronic guts of the Gridmaster.
But who? Spud asked. If you can't guess, you're better off not knowing right now.
McIntosh's resonant voice was barely audible over the clicks and whirs of the Gridmaster as it held the other stands of domestic kelp in functional stasis.
More than anything right now, we need a communications expert.
He backed out of the crawl space and added, with a sparkle in both eyes,
That would be Beatriz Tatoosh. Notify her that we require her services, if you would.
Spud smiled a wide smile. Services, he said. That's one way of... McIntosh cut him off.
Stow it,
McIntosh ordered, smiling his own wide smile. Just get her in here pronto.
And how long is this next chapter? Because I gotta go soon. That one's short. We'll do one more. It's a shorty. Plus, it leads with a Machiavelli quote. Maybe I should read that live on stream. That one's fun. Oh, this is from the Discourses, not the Prince.
Men are moved by two principal things, by love and by fear. Consequently, they are commanded as well by someone who wins their affection as by someone who arouses their fear. Indeed, in most instances, the one who arouses their fear gains more of a following and is more readily obeyed than the one who wins their affection.
Machiavelli, The Discourses. The fuel warning buzzer sounded its piercing screech above his console, and Spider Nevi cursed under his breath. They were very close now, very close, but he didn't dare take chances on making contact with dry fuel tanks.
"We're going to have to sit down in that muck," he said. "Make sure both screens and filters are intact. I don't want kelp clogging our inlets."
They'd seen several cargo train survivors on the surface, working to clear their intakes. They all moved in the slow-motion, dreamlike manner of those who are under the influence of one of the kelp's toxins. Surface travel on Pandora's seas was dangerous enough with the kelpways intact. Like great veins, the kelpways helped clear the waters of the storm-damaged fragments of fronds and other troublesome debris. Zentz grunted an acknowledgement, then paled.
But I'll have to go out there after we sit down, he said. That kelp it's crazy, with only two of us.
"With only two of us, one of us has to go out there. It's your fault we're out here at all, so you get the duty."
The look on Zentz's face was the one that Nevi wanted to see. Fear. Not fear of the kelp or fear of the sea, but fear of Spider Nevi. The expression of fear represented power to him, a raw power that even Flattery didn't wield among the people. Flattery maintained the politician's mask, and such a mask implied hope to anyone who witnessed it. Nevi projected no mask, no hope.
If I go out there to clean those intakes, you'll leave me.
Nevi released upon Zentz one of his rare smiles.
"It pleases me that you have due respect for my abilities," he said, "but I promised you a very special part in this drama, and your time has not yet come. I would not sacrifice you here for nothing. You know one thing about me if you know nothing else. I kill for something, not for nothing. I value human life, Mr. Zentz. This you must realize. I value it for what I can get out of it, what I can spend it on. The word value implies commodity, don't you think? The pleasure of killing ranks very low in my book as a good reason. Much as I might like to kill you just to get rid of a certain annoyance, I'm sure someone, somewhere, would make it worth my while to wait for the right price, the right trade, the right favor. Understand?"
Zentz stared straight out the cabin plaz. He was pale, appeared slightly more bloated than usual, and his pasty fingers crawled nervously over each other's backs.
Do you know why I kill?
Zentz asked him. Nevi finished the final attitude adjustment and settled onto the slightly choppy sea in a spot that he judged to be relatively clear of the kelp debris. As they descended, he saw that there was no clear spot. The struggle in this stand of kelp must have been tremendous.
Yes, I know why you kill, Nevi said. Like any of the lower animals, you kill to eat. It is your job, and you see no farther than that. You kill by orders, to someone else's plan, because to not kill means you yourself die. That is a difference between the two of us. I think of myself as a sculptor, a societal sculptor. The populace is my stone, and I shape it chip by chip into a form that suits me. The stone keeps growing, and my task is a relentless one. But I have time.
In a flurry at his keyboard, Nevi set the foil up for seawater intake and hydrogen conversion. The intakes clogged within blinks. Even with Zents out there to clear them, this would take longer than Nevi felt they could afford. He checked the fuel gauge.
15 minutes, he thought. Maybe 20 at the outside. Shit. Forget the intakes, Nevi said. There's a wild stand just northwest of here. We'll set up there to take on fuel. Then I'll see what I can learn from the director, he said. Don't worry, leaving you to the kelp would be a waste, and I'm not a wasteful man.
The convolutions of Zentz's brow unwrinkled somewhat. He lifted his sullen bulk out of his couch and donned a dive suit.
Just in case, Zentz said. I'm ready. I've heard about wild kelp. People disappear out here, and the kelp doesn't have a reason.
Nevi throttled up and lifted them off. Much as Zentz disgusted him, Nevi intended to keep him alive until the time came when it simply wasn't handy to do that anymore. The run to the blue sector took only 10 minutes, and all the time they were heading into the afternoon squall. A black wall pushed across the sea toward them, though when they set down in the blue kelp's lagoon they were haloed in the magnificent afternoon sun. Nevi deployed the intakes, but a warning light on his console told him they were still clogged. He tried retracting and redeploying them, but they stayed clogged.
Better get out there after all, Nevi said, and step on it. That squall's moving in pretty fast.
Zentz grumbled something, but trudged aft without complaining. Nevi noted from the console display that Zentz left the aft hatch open. He chuckled to himself.
He thinks he'll sink me if I submerge, and blow out the flight controls if I take off.
Nevi knew ways around both of those situations, the simplest being to go aft and close the hatch. He was tempted to do that now, just to give Zentz a thrill, but decided against it. They'd be refueled in 15 or 20 minutes, and with luck would lift off ahead of the storm. Nevi set out a call for Flattery on their private frequency, and received an immediate reply.
Mr. Nevi, Flattery said, time is wasting. Do you have them yet?
Nevi was surprised at the clarity of the reception. Indeed, the clarity of reception was unlike any that he'd experienced over the years. The activity of Pandora's two suns interfered constantly with transmissions, and lately sabotage of transmitters by the vermin made things even worse. The kelp itself often garbled radio communication, but this time it seemed to embellish it.
No, he said, we don't have them. We're refueling before the final push. I thought we were to make the most of this, get as many of the rebels as possible.
Forget it, Flattery said. I want Crista Galli now. She's not to talk with anyone before she sees me, understand?
Right, Nevi said.
Tonight's news is carrying notice of Ben Ozette's death. He's not to be seen, but I want him for my own. Do what you want with that Lapouche bastard.
Do you need support back there?
No, Flattery said. He sounded distracted. No, I've taken care of it. We've called some security back from the island docking sites and from demon patrols. These bastards. There are so many of them. They've looted the public market, and its warehouse is dry. We must have shot 300 of them, but they kept on coming. I've given orders to blow up any warehouses that are in danger of being looted. When they see their precious food blasted all over the landscape, they'll think twice about this kind of thing. You stick to your job, I'll handle things here. Don't call me again unless you have them.
Nevi was listening to static and the whine of the pumps processing out their hydrogen. He reached to break the connection, but hesitated. There was a pattern to the static, something he hadn't noticed before. It seemed as if there was a music in the background, and voices from several conversations that he couldn't quite pick out. Over and over, faint in the distance, he could hear the rhythmic repetition of Flattery's voice saying, "Mr. Nevi, Mr. Nevi, Mr. Nevi, Mr. Nevi." He closed the circuit and stared out over the sea toward a black curtain of storm. The surface chop had increased, and a wind had come up that was blowing the foil out of the center of the lagoon, and closer to the inner edge of blue kelp. He glanced at the fuel readout and was relieved that they were nearly full. What worried him was the distinct repetition of his name that continued, chant-like, even though he'd shut off the radio. The fuel light indicated full, so he shut down the pumps and sounded a warning klaxon to Zents before he retracted the intakes. He felt them thump into the bay, but there was still no sign of Zents. This was clear water, Nevi thought. He should have been back aboard after clearing the intakes once. He sounded the klaxon again, twice, but heard nothing. The aft hatch light remained on. Nevi secured the console and started back toward the aft hatch. The chant got louder, more distinct, and behind it a babble of voices rose on the air. The hair on his arms rose too, and Nevi armed his laser gun before leaving the cabin. He felt a metallic taste on his tongue, a taste he'd heard others describe as fear. He spat once on the deck, but the insidious taste remained. And that is where we will call it for today. And indeed, for this week. Next week we will continue. We're about halfway through the book, give or take. A couple pages here or there. Looks about halfway to me. Let's see. On Monday we'll be reading through more of Book 5 of Full Metal Panic, Ending Day by Day, Part 2, it's entitled. And on Wednesday, we'll be reading through more of, 40,000 in Gehenna by C.J. Cherryh. We're moving along. Sometime in October, early October, I think, we should be done with the Ascension Factor, and my general game plan is to start with The Nightland by William Hope Hodgson, as I have promised some individuals that I would do. I don't know what I'll do for Wednesdays, and it'll be a while yet before we're done with the collected volume that I have of Full Metal Panic, so that'll be another month or two. Month or so, I should say. So we'll see. Anything else salient? No, nothing comes to mind. Alrighty. Hopefully people enjoyed. The books, the Ascension Factor has now gunned its throttle. It is now beginning to get underway in a big way. And it's going to start moving pretty relentlessly towards the end. So much so that it's actually going to be a bit distracting. It'll be like, wait a minute, we're already done with that plot point? That just happened. What's going on? So it's been slow up until now, but it's going to get rocking and rolling. Okay, with that I'm going to go. Stay safe, stay sane, and be decent to each other. Have a good one. Given that deplatforming is currently the flavor of the month, or the flavor of our era, who knows what will happen if that happens. That's why I make sure to record these.
If for some reason I were to be deplatformed, I'll make sure I have a downloaded archive, and if people want them, they can just hop onto the Discord and tell me, and I'll get them whatever ones they want. I suppose it's possible I could set up a Patreon or something, and then be like, oh, if you want it, you can pay for the privilege, but I do this as a hobby. I do it for funsies, I don't do it for the money. I don't get paid for this, so this is purely for my own enjoyment, and if other people are enjoying it too, that's great. I get to read some fun books aloud. I've gotten some great suggestions from people from doing this, so even better as far as I'm concerned. Always on the lookout for more books. I read too much as it is, but God knows I've got to get like another bookshelf or clean out the ones that I've got. Anyway, with that, I'm going to call it. And hope you all have a good one. Have a great weekend. See you all later. I think. Yes. Bye.